The war room fell silent as the holographic display showed another red marker disappearing from the star map. The Vorthak Empire had claimed another system. Ambassador Zethra watched her people's territory shrink with each passing day, her blue-scaled hands trembling slightly as she gripped the table's edge. "How many ships did we lose this time?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be devastating. General Crixith, his reptilian features marked by battle scars, lowered his head. "All of them, Ambassador. 47 vessels and their crews. The Vorthak adapted to our quantum pulse weapons within minutes of engagement. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Kalari Federation had always prided itself on peaceful expansion and technological advancement. Their weapons were precise, their tactics clean, their strategies based on mathematical models that had worked for centuries. But none of that mattered against an enemy that learned and adapted faster than they could innovate. The Nexti home fleet lasted 18 minutes, reported Admiral Yilsa, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vorthak machines analyzed their shield frequencies and found weaknesses our scientists said were impossible to exploit. Zethra closed her eyes, remembering the transmission from the Nexti homeworld before it went dark. Millions of voices crying out before falling silent forever. The Vorthak didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them, stripping away every resource and leaving empty husks floating in space. "What about the defense platforms around Kalari Prime?" asked Councillor Velrun, his green skin pale with worry. "They'll hold for maybe a week," General Crixth replied honestly. "The Vorthak have studied our technology for months now. Their adaptive algorithms know how we fight, how we think, how we respond to threats. We're like children playing with toys against an opponent that rewrites the rules of physics." The room fell into despair. The Kalari Federation represented 12 different species, each contributing their best technology and brightest minds to their common defense. Yet against the Vorthak machines, all their advancement meant nothing. "There is one option we haven't considered," Zethra said slowly, drawing surprised looks from the council. "The humans. The Terrans?" Admiral Yilsa laughed bitterly. "They've been isolationist for decades. Ever since their civil wars ended, they've refused all contact with galactic civilization." "Exactly," Zethra replied. "They've been fighting themselves for longer than we've been a unified federation. While we developed peaceful technologies, they perfected the art of war." General Crixth shook his head. "Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They still use chemical propulsion for some of their ships. Their weapons are crude metal projectiles. What could they possibly offer?" "Experience," Zethra said firmly. "The kind of experience we pray we never needed until now." The council debated for hours. Many argued that humanity's violent history made them unreliable allies. Others pointed out that human technology was centuries behind Federation standards. But as reports came in of more lost worlds, more dying civilians, the arguments grew weaker. Finally, Zethra made the decision that would change everything. "I'm going to Earth, alone if necessary." The journey to the Sol system took 3 days in the fastest ship the Federation could spare. Zethra used the time to study everything they knew about humanity. What she found both fascinated and terrified her. These beings had spent thousands of years fighting each other with increasing creativity and brutality. They had developed weapons designed not just to kill, but to break their enemies' will to fight. They had survived planetary disasters, resource wars, and conflicts that should have wiped them out completely. When her ship emerged from hyperspace near Earth, she was immediately surrounded by human patrol vessels. Their ships looked ancient and crude, but Zethra noticed they moved with military precision. The humans who boarded her vessel wore simple uniforms and carried basic weapons, but their eyes held a hardness she had never seen in Federation forces. The meeting with the Terran Republic's leadership took place in a simple room with metal walls and harsh lighting. No decorations, no comfort, just function. The human officials listened to her plea with stone faces, asking pointed questions about Federation technology and Vorthak capabilities. "You want us to fight your war for you?" said President Martinez, a stern woman with gray hair and scars on her hands. "What's in it for us?" "Quantum crystals," Zethra replied. "Enough to power your entire fleet for centuries. And the gratitude of 12 species." The humans exchanged glances. Zethra couldn't read their expressions, but she sensed calculation behind their eyes. "We don't do gratitude," said General Thompson, a massive man with cybernetic implants replacing his left arm, but crystals we can use. Question is, are you ready for how we fight wars? We're desperate, Zethra admitted. Our people are dying. President Martinez nodded slowly. Then you'll get the 5th Colonial Marines. They're not pretty, they're not polite, and they'll probably horrify your people. But they know how to win ugly fights. When can they deploy? Zethra asked, hope flickering in her chest for the first time in months. They're already loading their ships, General Thompson replied with something that might have been a smile. Colonel Chen doesn't waste time when there's killing to be done. 3 days later, Zethra watched in confusion as the human expeditionary force arrived at the Federation staging area. Instead of sleek warships, she saw converted cargo vessels and mining ships with weapons welded to their hulls. Instead of pristine uniforms, the human soldiers wore patched armor and carried weapons that looked older than some Federation officers. Colonel Sarah Chen was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. When she shook Zethra's hand, her grip was firm and her smile was sharp as a blade. Don't worry, Ambassador, Chen said, looking at the shocked Federation officers around them. We may not look like much, but we've been practicing war since before your people discovered fire. The Vorthak think they understand conflict. They're about to learn that humans wrote the book on creative destruction. As the human soldiers began setting up their equipment and planning their assault, Zethra wondered if she had just saved her people or doomed them all. Admiral Yilsa stared at the human cargo ship docked at the Federation's primary military station. The vessel looked like it had been through a war already, with patches welded over hull breaches and weapons mounted in positions that defied all military engineering standards. Beside her, General Crixeth watched human soldiers unload equipment that looked more suited for a scrapyard than a battlefield. Are you certain these are military personnel? General Crixeth asked quietly as a group of humans rolled past carrying what appeared to be pieces of mining equipment. Colonel Chen overheard and grinned. Every piece of junk you see has killed someone at some point. The trick isn't having the best gear, it's knowing how to use what you have. The human colonel gestured to her soldiers, who were busy converting civilian equipment into weapons. See Martinez over there? He's turning those atmospheric processors into electromagnetic pulse bombs. Williams is modifying those industrial cutters into ship killers. When you fought as many resource wars as we have, you learned that everything is a weapon if you're creative enough. Zethra approached cautiously. The more she learned about human warfare, the more disturbed she became. Colonel, our intelligence shows the Vorthak fleet will arrive in 6 hours. Shouldn't your forces be preparing defensive positions? Defense is for people who plan to lose slowly, Chen replied, checking her sidearm. We're going to attack. Attack? General Crixeth's scales rippled with shock. The Vorthak have 40 ships. You have 12 converted cargo vessels and some mining equipment. Exactly. They'll expect you to run or hide. They won't expect us to charge straight at them like maniacs. The human plan, when Chen finally explained it, sounded like organized suicide. The Marines would split into 3 groups, each using different tactics that violated every rule of space combat. One group would pretend to flee while laying mines made from modified fusion cores. Another would broadcast false surrender signals while hiding inside hollowed-out asteroids. The third would attack head-on with weapons that shouldn't work but somehow did. The Vorthak adapt to logical strategies, Chen explained to the confused alien officers. Their computers analyze patterns and develop counters. But you can't counter crazy, and humans have spent millennia perfecting different types of crazy. When the Vorthak fleet emerged from hyperspace, their ships moved in perfect formation. Each vessel was a work of art, sleek and deadly, with weapons that could vaporize a Federation battleship in seconds. Their communication frequencies buzzed with efficient machine calculations as they prepared for another easy conquest. The first sign something was wrong came when the fleeing human ships suddenly exploded. But instead of being destroyed, they released clouds of metallic debris that stuck to Vorthak hulls and began eating through armor plating. The machines had never encountered nanocorrosives disguised as ship fragments. Unknown weapon type. Came the cold Vorthak transmission. Analyzing composition. While they analyzed, the human ships hiding in asteroids opened fire with weapons that shouldn't exist. Sergeant Rodriguez had figured out how to turn industrial mining lasers into ship killers by overloading their power cores. The beams were crude and inefficient, but they punched through Vorthak shields that were designed to stop sophisticated energy weapons. not brute force industrial tools. The machines adapted quickly, adjusting their shield frequencies to stop the mining lasers. But by then, the third human group was among them, firing projectile weapons that moved too slowly to trigger point defense systems, but carried enough explosive power to cripple engine sections. Projectile weapons detected, the Vorthak computers reported. Threat level, minimal. The assessment changed rapidly when those minimal threats began detonating inside their ships. Human kinetic rounds were packed with shaped charges that turned engine compartments into scrap metal. The machines tried to adapt their armor, but each human shell carried different explosives, some military, some improvised from civilian chemicals. Captain Torres piloted her converted cargo ship directly into the Vorthak formation, her vessel's hull covered in fake damage to look like a crippled refugee transport. When the enemy ships moved to capture her, she triggered the surprise hidden in her cargo hold. 50 tons of mining explosives connected to every power cell on the ship. The explosion took out 3 Vorthak vessels and damaged 5 more. The machines immediately began scanning for similar threats, but Torres's sacrifice had served its purpose. While they focused on detecting explosive cargo ships, they missed the real danger. Dr. Yuki had spent years developing medical nanobots for treating radiation exposure. With some creative reprogramming, those same nanobots became a plague that ate electronic components. Her medical supply rockets looked harmless on Vorthak sensors, right up until they released clouds of microscopic destroyers that began consuming circuit boards from the inside. Systems failure in multiple sections, reported the Vorthak flagship. Unknown cause. The machines tried everything: electromagnetic pulses, radiation bursts, even dumping atmosphere to kill the nanobots. Nothing worked because the bots were designed to survive in the vacuum of space and the radiation environment of a damaged reactor. As Vorthak ships began losing power and weapons, the human forces pressed their attack, but they didn't fight like any military force the machines had ever encountered. Individual ships broke formation to pursue personal vendettas. Marines used profanity-laced communications that confused translation programs. Some humans pretended to be wounded to lure rescue ships into traps. Warning, transmitted the Vorthak command ship. Enemy behavior patterns do not match any known military doctrine. That's because we're not following doctrine, Chen replied on an open channel. We're following our gut, and our gut says you machines need to learn what happens when you mess with someone else's family. The turning point came when Corporal Williams managed to board a Vorthak vessel by hiding inside a piece of debris from his own destroyed fighter. Once inside, he didn't try to capture the ship or gather intelligence. Instead, he found the main computer core and began feeding it bad information. False sensor readings, incorrect damage reports, and tactical data that made no sense. The Vorthak ship turned on its own allies, firing on vessels it thought were human infiltrators. When the machines tried to correct the error, Williams fed them new false data. Within minutes, the entire Vorthak formation was shooting at shadows while human forces picked them apart. "This is impossible," came a final transmission from the Vorthak flagship as it listed heavily to port, its engines failing. "Your tactics violate all principles of logical warfare. Logic is for people who don't understand that war is about breaking things and hurting people until they stop fighting back," Chen replied. "We've been doing this for 10,000 years. You're just getting started." The surviving Vorthak ships retreated in confusion, their adaptive algorithms overloaded with contradictory data. For the first time since the war began, a Vorthak fleet had been defeated not by superior technology, but by pure human stubbornness and creativity. As the human Marines celebrated their victory by sharing crude alcohol and telling impossible stories, Zethra realized that her people had allied themselves with something far more dangerous than the Vorthak machines. They had partnered with a species that turned war into art and made weapons out of hope and desperation. The real question now was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity brought to warfare. 3 weeks after the first human victory, the Federation's military training grounds looked like a disaster zone. What had once been pristine facilities designed for theoretical war games now resembled an active combat zone, complete with smoking craters and improvised fortifications built from whatever materials the humans could find. Zethra watched in fascination and horror as Sergeant Martinez demonstrated explosive construction to a group of Kalari engineers. Using nothing but standard civilian electronics and cleaning supplies, He had built a device that could punch through 3 meters of reinforced armor plating. The key is understanding that everything is connected, Martinez explained to his audience of wide-eyed alien students. Your water purification tablets contain chlorine. Your electronics contain metals. Your cleaning supplies have acids. Put them together the right way and you can level a building. Engineer Thys, a tall Kalari with intricate scale patterns, raised her hand nervously. But Sergeant, these materials are found on every civilian station. Are you saying anyone could build weapons like this? Anyone with the right knowledge and wrong intentions, Martinez confirmed. That's why you need to think like someone who wants to hurt you. The Vorthak machines analyze military targets, but they don't expect attacks from food processing plants or garbage recyclers. Across the training ground, Corporal Williams was teaching a lesson that would have been considered criminal in Federation space just months earlier. He had assembled a mixed group of alien soldiers around a holographic display showing a typical Federation supply convoy. Forget about honor, forget about fighting fair, forget about everything your military academies taught you, Williams said bluntly. The goal is to win, not to look good doing it. The hologram showed multiple attack vectors not just against the convoy's defensive escort, but against support infrastructure. Williams highlighted power stations, communication relays, and supply depots that had nothing to do with the military but everything to do with keeping forces operational. Hit the power grid, and their shield generators go down. Cut the communications and they can't coordinate responses. Destroy their food supply, and they start making mistakes because they're hungry and desperate. Lieutenant Kess, a young Nexty officer with feathers that betrayed his nervousness, spoke up. But those targets contain civilians. Attacking them would be effective, Williams interrupted. The Vorthak don't care about your ethics. They'll use civilian infrastructure to support military operations, then hide behind your moral codes when you hesitate to destroy it. Either you're serious about winning, or you're serious about losing slowly. The humans had divided the alien forces into small units, each learning different aspects of what they called asymmetric warfare. The term itself was new to Federation military doctrine, which had always emphasized matched forces fighting according to established rules. In another section of the training ground, Dr. Yuki was teaching battlefield medicine that horrified Federation medical personnel. She demonstrated how to treat injuries using only combat supplies, how to keep fighting with wounds that should be crippling, and most disturbing of all, how to determine when someone was beyond saving. Triage isn't about being nice, Yuki explained to a group of alien medics. It's about math. You have limited supplies and limited time. Save the ones you can actually help, and don't waste resources on hopeless cases or minor injuries. Medic Veltar, a gentle Kalari who had spent decades treating civilians, watched in shock as Yuki demonstrated field amputation techniques. Doctor, this is barbaric. Our medical facilities can regenerate limbs, repair organ damage. Not in the middle of a firefight, they can't, Yuki replied firmly. Your advanced medicine is wonderful when you have time, power, and proper facilities. But when you're fighting for your life in a damaged ship with failing life support, you need to know how to keep people alive with whatever you can find. The most disturbing lessons came from Colonel Chen herself, who taught the alien officers about something humans called total war. Her classroom was a simple room with uncomfortable chairs and harsh lighting, designed to keep students alert and focused. The Vorthak make one critical mistake, Chen explained to the mixed group of Federation officers. They assume their enemies will fight like civilized beings following rules of engagement. They're programmed to expect certain responses to certain actions. General Crixith listened with growing unease as Chen outlined human military philosophy. Colonel, what you're describing sounds like terrorism. The difference between terrorism and military tactics is who wins, Chen replied without emotion. The Vorthak want to fight a clean war where they can predict and counter every move. So we fight a dirty war where nothing follows patterns they can analyze. She activated a holographic display showing Federation space. Red markers indicated worlds already lost to the Vorthak, while blue markers showed remaining Federation strongholds. Between them, Chen began drawing lines that connected seemingly unrelated targets. They expect you to defend your worlds. Instead, you abandon them and attack their supply lines. They expect you to protect civilians. Instead, you evacuate everyone and turn empty cities into traps. They expect logical military targets. Instead, you hit weather control stations, entertainment networks, and garbage processing facilities. Admiral Yilsa studied the display with growing horror. "Colonel, you're describing the complete breakdown of civilized warfare." "I'm describing victory," Chen corrected. "The Vorthak machines are efficient because they follow programs designed to counter rational military strategies. Make your strategy irrational enough, and their programming becomes a weakness instead of a strength." The training continued for weeks, with humans teaching alien skills that violated every principle of Federation military doctrine. They learned to lie convincingly to enemy interrogators. They practiced sabotage techniques using common household items. They studied psychological warfare designed to break enemy morale, rather than just destroy enemy forces. Captain Torres specialized in what she called creative interpretation of military communications. She taught alien officers how to use surrender signals to lure enemies into traps, how to fake distress calls to redirect enemy resources, and how to broadcast false information that would confuse enemy intelligence. "The Vorthak trust their sensors and communications," Torres explained. "They assume information is accurate because machines don't lie. But if you control the information they receive, you control their decisions." Not all the alien students adapted well to human teaching methods. Several Kalari officers requested transfers, rather than learn techniques they considered dishonorable. Some Nexti pilots refused to practice kamikaze maneuvers even in simulation. The humans didn't argue or try to convince them. They simply worked with the students willing to learn. The breakthrough came when the combined human-alien forces faced their first real test. A Vorthak scouting fleet entered the Terek system, expecting to find standard Federation defenses. Instead, they encountered something their algorithms couldn't process. The system appeared empty except for civilian traffic and mining operations. When the Vorthak ships moved to investigate, the mining operations revealed themselves as disguised weapons platforms. The civilian traffic launched surprise attacks using hidden weapons. Even the system's asteroid field had been weaponized, with rocks programmed to ram Vorthak ships at maximum velocity. "Unknown defensive pattern," transmitted the confused Vorthak commander, requesting tactical analysis. The analysis never came because the scouting fleet's communications were being jammed by signals that appeared to be entertainment broadcasts but contained viral programs designed to crash Vorthak computer systems. By the time the machines realized they were under attack, half their fleet was already crippled. The surviving Vorthak ships retreated in disorder, carrying reports of defensive systems that made no tactical sense. Their command analyzed the data and reached a disturbing conclusion. The Federation forces were no longer fighting according to predictable patterns. As news of the victory spread through Federation space, Zethra realized that the humans had done more than teach her people new tactics. They had fundamentally changed how the Federation thought about warfare itself. The question now was whether this transformation would be enough to save her people, or whether it would destroy everything they had once stood for. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the fighting began, the Federation had hope. It was a dark, violent hope that would have horrified them months earlier, but it was hope nonetheless. The assault on Vorthak Command Station Nexus 7 was supposed to be impossible. The massive structure hung in space like a mechanical spider, its hull bristling with weapons that could vaporize entire fleets. For months it had served as the Vorthak's primary coordination center, directing their conquest of Federation space with cold, mechanical efficiency. Colonel Chen studied the tactical display one final time, knowing that everyone in the briefing room understood the mission's true nature. This wasn't a military operation. It was a suicide mission disguised as strategy. Station's adaptive shields will counter any conventional assault within minutes, she explained to the mixed force of humans and aliens gathered around her. "So we're not going conventional. We're going to do something so stupid that even we think it's crazy." Lieutenant Kess, who had grown from a nervous Nexti pilot into a competent warrior over the past months, raised his hand. "Colonel, define stupid in human military terms." "We're going to ram their shields with ships full of explosives while our infantry rides the blast wave to board their station," Chen replied calmly. "Then we'll fight our way to the core and manually overload their quantum reactor." The silence that followed was broken by a chuckle from Sergeant Martinez. "I've done dumber things. Usually after too much alcohol, but still. The plan violated every principle of space combat doctrine ever written. The human ships would accelerate directly toward the station's shields, while the combined alien-human boarding parties rode in specialized pods designed to survive the explosive impact. The shields would stop the ships but not the blast waves, which would carry the assault teams through the defense grid. "The timing has to be perfect," explained Captain Torres. "Too early and we miss the blast wave. Too late and we become part of the explosion. We get one chance at this." Engineer Theis, now an expert in creative explosive construction, reviewed the technical specifications with growing concern. "Captain, the survival rate for this approach is less than 15%. Better odds than staying alive if the Vorthak win the war," replied Corporal Williams. "Besides, Marines don't plan on dying. We plan on making the other guy die for his cause." The preparation took 18 hours. Human Marines checked weapons that looked primitive compared to Federation technology, but had proven deadly effective against Vorthak forces. Alien soldiers practiced boarding maneuvers they had never imagined attempting before working with humans. Medical teams prepared for casualties that conventional medicine couldn't treat. Dr. Yuki distributed combat stimulants that would keep wounded soldiers fighting long past normal human endurance limits. "These will override pain, fear, and exhaustion," she warned. "But they'll also hide injuries that could kill you. Use them only if you're already expecting to die." The most touching moment came when the alien soldiers began adapting human rituals they had observed over months of fighting together. Kalari warriors painted unit insignias on their scales using human-style military markings. Next, the pilots performed pre-battle ceremonies that combined their traditional songs with human military prayers. "Strange how war makes family out of strangers," observed General Krixth as he watched a group of Kalari and human soldiers sharing rations and telling jokes that relied on shared experiences of combat. The assault began at 0600 station time. 12 human ships accelerated toward Nexus 7 on collision courses, their hulls packed with every explosive the combined forces could manufacture. The Vorthak station responded with typical machine efficiency, reinforcing shields and preparing point defense systems. "Suicide attack detected," reported the station's artificial intelligence, adjusting defensive parameters. The machines calculated impact vectors, explosive yields, and shield stress tolerances with perfect accuracy. What they couldn't calculate was human ingenuity applied to the problem of controlled explosions. Each ship carried different explosive mixtures designed to create specific blast patterns that would punch holes in space-time itself. The first ship to impact was Martinez's converted cargo hauler, packed with mining charges arranged in a pattern that created a shaped blast wave. The explosion looked like a flower of fire blooming against the vortex shields, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Following the blast wave, invisible to Vorthak sensors, came 12 assault pods carrying the most experienced soldiers from both species. The pods were crude constructions of human engineering and alien technology, designed to protect their occupants just long enough to reach the station's hull. Captain Torres piloted the lead pod, feeling the blast wave carry her team through layers of defensive systems that had never been designed to stop objects riding explosions. Beside her, Engineer Theis monitored systems that shouldn't exist, but somehow worked because human engineers refused to accept the word. Impossible. The first pod smashed into Nexus 7's hull with enough force to crater metal, but their passengers survived thanks to crash systems borrowed from human mining equipment and alien medical technology. Within seconds, cutting torches were burning through armor plating, while alien engineers used their technology to create entry points. "We're in," Torres reported over the tactical net, beginning interior assault. The fighting inside the station was unlike anything in Federation military history. Vorthak drones swarmed through corridors designed for machines, not living beings. The passages were too narrow for proper formations and too well defended for conventional assault tactics, so the humans didn't use conventional tactics. They used mining explosives to collapse ceilings on drone formations. They turned life support systems into weapons by introducing gases that corroded machine components. They used maintenance tunnels and ventilation shafts to appear in places that violated all principles of military engineering. The aliens learned quickly. Lieutenant Kess discovered that his people's natural agility let them navigate zero-gravity sections better than human Marines, allowing him to set up ambush positions in areas where Vorthak drones couldn't maneuver effectively. Kalari warriors used their claws to damage electronic systems in ways that no tool could replicate. But the real transformation came when the fighting grew personal. When Private Johnson was cornered by 3 Vorthak combat drones, it was Theis who saved him. using her engineering knowledge to overload a power conduit and electrocute the machines. When Theiss was injured by debris from the explosion, Johnson carried her to safety despite taking fire from multiple directions. "I got you, partner," Johnson said as he dragged the wounded Kalari engineer through a corridor filled with smoke and sparks. Marines don't leave anybody behind. The moment that changed everything came when Captain Torres's team reached a critical junction leading to the station's central core. The passage was defended by automated systems that had adapted to counter every known assault technique. The only way forward required someone to manually hold the corridor while others advanced. Torres didn't hesitate. "I'll buy you time. Get to that reactor and finish this." But as she prepared to make her stand, she found herself joined by Engineer Theiss, Lieutenant Kess, and 6 other alien soldiers who refused to let her fight alone. "Captain," said Theiss, checking her improvised weapons one final time, "humans taught us that war is about family. You're our family now." The fight for the corridor lasted 17 minutes. Torres and her mixed alien-human team held against wave after wave of Vorthak drones, using every trick and tactic they had learned in months of brutal warfare. When their advanced weapons failed, they used improvised explosives. When those ran out, they used their hands and claws and teeth. Torres took a blast meant for Kess, the energy weapon burning through her armor and into her chest. As she fell, Kess caught her and continued firing with one arm while supporting her with the other. "Not today," Kess snarled at the approaching drones, his voice carrying an anger that his peaceful species had never known before meeting humans. "You don't get to take her." The corridor filled with smoke and the sound of weapons fire, screams of pain and rage, and the metallic death cries of destroyed machines. When it ended, half the defenders were dead or wounded, but the passage was clear. Dr. Yuki reached Torres just as the captain's vital signs began failing. The human medic worked frantically with equipment designed for human physiology, adapting it for injuries no Federation hospital had ever seen. "Stay with me, Captain," Yuki ordered. "That's a direct order from your medic." Torres managed a weak smile. "Did we—" "Reactors overloading," came Williams' voice over the comm. 2 minutes to detonation. All teams evacuate immediately. As the surviving assault teams raced toward their extraction pods, Torres insisted on walking despite her injuries. She was supported by Theiss on one side and Kess on the other, alien hands keeping a human warrior on her feet. "This is what victory looks like," Torres said as they reached the evacuation point. "Not pretty, not clean, but together." The explosion of Nexus 7 lit up space like a new star visible from 3 star systems away. The Vorthak command network, suddenly cut off from its central coordination, began making the kind of errors that only uncoordinated machines could make. But more importantly, the survivors of the assault had forged something stronger than any alliance. They had become a brotherhood bound by shared sacrifice and mutual respect. The Kalari homeworld hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its surface scarred by Vorthak bombardment but still beautiful, still alive. Around it, the largest fleet in Federation history prepared for what everyone knew would be the final battle of the war. Colonel Chen stood on the bridge of the makeshift flagship, a converted mining vessel that had somehow become the command center for the most desperate military operation in galactic history. Through the viewport she could see hundreds of ships, human cargo haulers, alien patrol boats, civilian transports pressed into military service, and the few remaining Federation warships that had survived 3 years of brutal warfare. Final count, Colonel, reported Admiral Yilsa, her scales showing the stress patterns that had become common among Federation officers. 437 vessels of various classes, approximately 60,000 personnel. Chen nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the approaching Vorthak armada. Over 800 ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering, supported by manufacturing platforms that could build replacement vessels faster than the Federation could destroy them. "Numbers were never our advantage anyway," Chen replied. "How are our special preparations?" "The civilian evacuation is complete," reported General Crixuth. "Every populated world in the sector has been emptied. Our modified cargo ships are in position around the homeworld." The plan was insane even by human standards. Instead of defending Kalari Prime with conventional forces, they were going to use the planet itself as bait. The Vorthak would expect a desperate last stand, with Federation forces clustering around their most important world. Instead, they would find something no machine intelligence could have predicted. Engineer Thys, now bearing the scars of multiple battles and the informal rank of Chief Explosive Artist, reviewed her modifications one final time. Colonel, the planetary shields have been reconfigured according to your specifications. When the Vorthak fleet enters optimal range, we can implement the Crazy Ivan maneuver. The Crazy Ivan was a tactic that had earned its name during humanity's civil wars, when desperate fleet commanders would do anything to avoid defeat. The principle was simple. If you couldn't win a conventional battle, you changed the rules until conventional tactics became meaningless. Time to Vorthak arrival? Chen asked. 37 minutes, came the reply from multiple officers monitoring different sensor arrays. Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing this might be the last time she spoke to many of the people who had become her family over 3 years of impossible warfare. All ships, all units, this is Chen. In about half an hour, we're going to do something that will either save the galaxy or get us all killed trying. I've been fighting with you humans and aliens for 3 years now, and I can honestly say you're the most stubborn, creative, and dangerous people I've ever had the honor to serve with. She paused, looking out at the fleet that represented the hopes of dozens of species. The Vorthak think they understand us. They think they've analyzed our tactics and predicted our responses. They're about to learn that the one thing you can never predict is what people will do when they're fighting for everything they love. The response came not as words, but as actions. Across the fleet, crews made final preparations for a battle that would determine whether organic life had a future in their galaxy. Human Marines checked weapons that had been modified by alien technology. Kalari engineers ensured that systems designed by different species could work together under combat stress. Next to pilots practiced maneuvers that violated every principle of safe flying. When the Vorthak fleet emerged from hyperspace, their formation was perfect. 812 vessels arranged in mathematical precision, with support ships, command platforms, and assault craft positioned according to algorithms that had conquered half the galaxy. Federation fleet detected, came the cold machine transmission. Configuration matches predicted defensive pattern, initiating standard conquest protocol. The Vorthak moved toward Kalari Prime with mechanical confidence, their sensors reading Federation forces exactly where computer models had predicted they would be. What their sensors couldn't detect was that those Federation forces were mostly automated decoys, controlled by the real fleet hidden on the far side of the system. "They're taking the bait," reported Captain Torres, from her position aboard a ship that had been rebuilt 3 times during the war. All Vorthak forces are focusing on the homeworld. "Execute Phase 1, Chen ordered. The first surprise came when the planetary defense platforms around Kalari Prime didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they launched what appeared to be mining charges, thousands of them, filling space between the planet and the approaching Vorthak fleet with clouds of seemingly harmless explosives. Primitive projectile weapons detected, the Vorthak computers reported. Threat level, minimal. The assessment changed when those primitive projectiles began connecting to each other, forming a web of explosive charges linked by quantum entanglement technology that the Vorthak had never encountered. When Engineer Thys triggered the detonation sequence, the space around Kalari Prime lit up like a miniature star, but the explosion was only the beginning. As the blast wave expanded, it carried with it specialized nanobots designed by Dr. Yuki to survive in the vacuum of space and bond with any electronic systems they encountered. The nanobots didn't destroy Vorthak ships, they made them stupid. Warning, came increasingly frantic transmissions from the Vorthak fleet. Multiple system failures, navigation errors, weapons targeting malfunctions. While the enemy fleet struggled with sabotaged systems, the real Federation forces emerged from hiding. But instead of engaging in conventional ship-to-ship combat, they implemented tactics that no sane military commander would ever attempt. Human cargo ships rammed Vorthak cruisers at maximum velocity, their hulls packed with explosives and their pilots already in escape pods. Alien fighters dove into enemy formations kamikaze style, using their ships as guided missiles. The few remaining Federation warships used their most advanced weapons not against enemy vessels, but against the space around them, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled Vorthak ships into collision courses with their own allies. "This is impossible," transmitted the Vorthak fleet commander. "Enemy tactics violate all principles of military logic. Logic is for people who fight to win battles," Chen replied on an open channel. "We fight to end wars." The battle raged for 6 hours, with both fleets taking massive casualties. But as the fighting continued, the true genius of the human plan became apparent. Every Vorthak ship destroyed released clouds of specialized viruses designed to infect other machine intelligences. Every Federation vessel lost triggered explosive charges that had been hidden throughout the system months earlier. The turning point came when Chen received reports that the Vorthak were attempting to retreat. Their fleet, reduced to fewer than 200 functional ships, was trying to withdraw to hyperspace and regroup for another assault. "Not this time," Chen said quietly. "Execute final phase." The final phase required a sacrifice that Chen had hoped to avoid. The Kalari homeworld's planetary shields, modified with human technology and alien power sources, could be reconfigured into a massive energy weapon capable of destroying any ship within 3 light minutes. But using it would require someone to manually control the targeting system from inside the planet's shield grid, in a position that would be vaporized when the weapon fired. "I'll do it," Chen announced to her staff. "I know the systems best." "Colonel, that's suicide," protested Admiral Yilsa. "The energy release will kill anyone within 100 kilometers of the control station." "Which is why it has to be me," Chen replied calmly. "I've been asking people to die for this cause for 3 years. Time I took my own turn." But as Chen prepared to transport to the planetary surface, she found herself facing a rebellion from her own forces. Captain Torres, still bearing scars from the Nexus 7 assault, stood between Chen and the shuttle bay. "With respect, Colonel, that's not how this works," Torres said firmly. "Marines don't let their officers make the heroic sacrifices. That's what sergeants are for." "Torres, that's an order." "And I'm refusing it," Torres replied with a grin that was all teeth and determination. "Court-martial me after we win." The argument was settled when Engineer Thys appeared with a solution that was typically alien and typically insane. Using technology that combined Kalari quantum mechanics with human explosive engineering, she had built a remote control system that would let Chen operate the planetary weapon from orbit. "It's not tested," Thys admitted. "It might not work at all, but it might let you survive this." "Good enough for Marines," Chen said, accepting the device. "If it works, I live to fight another day. If it doesn't, at least I take some of them with me." The final battle lasted less than an hour. As the Vorthak fleet attempted to escape, Chen activated the modified planetary shields. The energy release was visible from 3 star systems away, a beam of pure destruction that reached across space to touch each fleeing enemy vessel. The Vorthak ships didn't just explode, they were unmade, their molecular structure torn apart by forces that exceeded the design parameters of any known weapon.